As students, we sought out the role mental health plays in the daily lives of individuals across the globe. We narrowed our focus on the perspective each society has, as a whole, has on those suffering with mental illness. What is mental health? In general, mental health is a level of psychological well-being. However, this is very broad and allows room for influence of specific cultures, components. It is estimated that 1 in 4 people across the world will be affected by mental illness at some point in their lives. Over 1 million people die due to suicide each year, and is the third leading cause of death among young people.
My culture view mental illness in a way that it's not acceptable, like they are always neglected. It's always a private conversation. People do not come openly and talk about it.
Over 2.8 million Ghanaians have a mental disability. Only 1% of the country's health budget goes towards mental health services.
We don't have support groups like you would in the US. Mm-hmm. So a lot of women can have depression, even postnatal depression. When I had my son, I had postnatal depression, and it's not recognized in my culture. And in the US, there was a form you had to fill how you were feeling, etc., and you could be referred to somebody to speak to. Do a lot of work with the prisoners. I have a prison NGO, and you notice that a lot of the women in my program all have some form of a mental issue. I mean, when you have somebody tell you that she go ahead and murder my husband or something, clearly she has a mental problem, but she doesn't have the resources to deal with it. So by the time they act out, if you trace their history, they probably started with depression and all sorts of things. We have a psychiatric hospital in Ghana. About 4 years ago, an investigative journalist went undercover, and what he saw was gross abuse. I mean, a lot of people get cured at a mental hospital and their families don't come back for them. So they end up still living in the mental hospital with other mental patients. And I understand something called shared psychosis, where they start even to act like even if they've been cured, because that's all they know. It's a taboo, and people sort of like shun you, stay away from you, and it's just out of fear, ignorance, and not knowing.
Africans practice both a Western-influenced medicine model and traditional African model.
In Cape Town and Johannesburg and Durban and more of the westernized places in South Africa, they have the knowledge about mental disorders. So obviously you take the pills, and if it's severe, you go into like the hospital, you'd be like hospitalized. Depression is the new pandemic. It's huge, and people are open. They say, I have depression, I have bipolar disorder, I have anxiety, and schools are now like educated on how to help kids when it happens, like anxiety attacks. The teachers now have like workshops to figure out what to do with it. Whereas more rural areas such as Limpopo or the Northern Cape, even some places of the Western Cape, still have that view of demonic possession, or they just don't have any knowledge about it. Also, it's very taboo in that culture. They believe that it is like a possession of demons, and that it is the devil that is taking over your life. And so it also happens to me. So I suffer from depression, and my one friend was telling me you just got to pray it away, like God's gonna help you just got to pray it away. And a lot of people still don't quite understand that depression is like chemical imbalance in your brain. I do believe in the traditional cultures you'd take what is it called, like herbal medicines, type of stuff like that would help. So like rosemary and aloe, and put that together, and then or a big thing on how to cure mental illnesses in the more like rural traditional cultures is that they'd talk to the ancestors and try to do like rituals to get the ancestors in the atmosphere of where you're staying, and pray to them, dance to them, and the ancestors are believed to help you with all your issues.
Two important government bills were passed in India that shape how those affected with mental illness receive treatment in this country today. In 1987, the Mental Health Act of India aimed to make better the treatment and attitude towards those affected with mental illness. In 2016, the Mental Health Care Bill was passed, which allows free medication, healthcare access, and insurance coverage. We were able to obtain the perspectives of an Ayurvedic professional on the topic of mental illness.
Treatments. The preparatory stage consists of various massages to calm down the person or a shirodhara. The second stage is always panchakarma. Panchakarma is the detoxification stage because otherwise these toxins interfere with the psychological activities of the human being. Yeah. So, and the third stage is to stabilize the stabilization stage, to stabilize the health. So, in just like in any other diseases, in psychiatry also, we have the similar type of treatments, but the medicines vary. Medicines vary from person to person. That is very interesting because recently we have found modern science has found that there is something called pharmacogenomics. Pharmacogenomics is a science that says that all the medicines do not work similarly in all the persons. Ayurveda was telling for the last 5,000 years the same thing.
Culture in general, the Indian culture, how do they perceive people with mental illness? Negative, positive?
Positive, no issues. In Ayurveda treats them as it's all chemicals. The body, we eat food. If the digestion is proper, everything is proper. If the digestion is wrong, new chemicals are made in the body, generated in the body, and those new chemicals will act as antigen or allergen. That can cause immunity problems, autoimmune diseases, psychological problems, so many other diseases. So what we have to do is to detoxify the body.
When asking how society views those with mental illness and what treatment options are available, a local tour guide reported, mental illnesses like depression and ADD are seen as a personal problem rather than a mental one. Therefore, people with similar illnesses have a hard time finding adequate care. They have to rely on family. He further discussed how his life is very difficult as he has a son affected by mental illness. According to a study conducted by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, of all Southeast Asian nations, the youth of Myanmar had the lowest prevalence of suicidal ideation.
Mental health treatment in here is basically in here is for the one who addicted drugs or alcohol. But the drugs problem was a huge problem. It's in the villages. Some villages, if they addicted something or if they have that problem, they not go to the mental health treatment. They go to the monastery.
Depressions, I don't even think they know what depression is.
What about like ADHD or ADD?
Oh, no way. I think we call this thing like not 100%. I don't think we never really pay attention to how important and how serious that was, and they should be like institutes. They should be in like in mental institutions and things like that. We, as Burmese society, has to talk about. So, from my understanding, it's getting better, but I really think that it's still very, very new to people.
There are 3 main mental health hospitals for the whole population of Vietnam. Of all Southeast Asian nations, the youth of Vietnam had the highest prevalence of suicidal ideation according to one study. Factors that played a role in this ideation include gender, age, living in a lower middle income country, lack of friends, loneliness, bullying and victimization, having been in a physical fight in the past 12 months, lack of parental or guardian support, tobacco use, and having a history of drinking.
I think mental illness is still something really new to Vietnamese culture. I mean, we only think that if you have something that is like can be seen outside, then you will have a sickness. And the act of going to therapists and reaching out for your problem is kind of not really common, because therapists will take you out and then make some tests, but it's more like physical tests about how your lung works and how your brain works or something like that, but not an actual problem that you are facing with. You can still undervalue the importance of mental illness, and we still haven't has any right treatment for mental illness people. I think for some people it's still kind of hard to reach out and talk to other people about the problem they are facing, because we are still have a negative look towards mental illness people, because we kind of think that they kind of something really bad. We use bad words to describe them, like crazy.
As the perspective of mental illness differs across generations and areas of living, we also interviewed an older gentleman from the countryside of Vietnam.
Over problem, even though now you know that we had a mental illness hospital, but we need more expertise in that. Yes, but I think in somehow the people they still shy if they have some mental illness. They think probably I have problem, and people look down me or something like that.
Yeah.
Despite these available support systems, Japan has a relatively high suicide rate compared to other countries. Approximately 70 Japanese people commit suicide every day. One potential reason why the suicide rate is high is because there is a long history of suicides in the name of honor to the family. Furthermore, acceptance and conformity are values of importance in Japanese culture. Thus, if one is perceived by others negatively, there may be an increased likelihood of suicidal ideation when one feels alienated. We were fortunate enough to obtain a perspective from a Buddhist monk in Japan about the topic of mental health. After asking him to explain society's views on this topic, he stated, "For the most part, people are able to talk openly about mental illness in Japan, especially between their close family and friends. There are several hospitals in Japan that are specialized just for mental health patients, and this type of healthcare is very accessible due to universal healthcare insurance systems." The subject of mental health is addressed differently between genders, age groups, class status, religion, and location of living. By understanding this fact, we can become more aware of the need to respect and address prevalent issues such as these in a culturally appropriate way. We are advocating for the decreased stigmatization of those affected by mental illness. We also want to emphasize the importance of educating each other in recognizing those who are affected by mental illness and what each individual can do to rally support for another. We have learned that traditional societies would benefit from education or knowledge about mental health, but the less obvious solution lies in those societies where mental illness is increased by individualism, lack of community support, and social pressure. By having a global view on mental health, we can begin to address some of the root causes of mental illness and advocate for more reliable treatment and support options.